Hey guys, tonight we're taking a deep dive into an era that was somehow grittier than your grandma's shag carpet, the 1980s. But not the fun, neon, E.T., on a bike 1980s. No, we're talking about the just say no, big hair, bad choices, national panic version, the crack epidemic. Specifically, what life was actually like if you were a so-called crack baby in that wild decade, when hysteria ran faster than a kid with roller skates in a shopping mall. So before you get comfortable, do me a favor and like this video, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment with where you're listening from, or your favorite 80s commercial jingle, because who can forget? Where's the beef? But only if you actually enjoy this sort of thing. I mean, don't do it out of pity. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that nice retro static, maybe slip into your fuzziest acid wash pajamas, and get ready to relax. You're about to time travel into a world of moral panic, questionable science, and more Reagan speeches than anyone should have to endure. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to wake up in a hospital nursery, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of cigarette smoke and Lysol, while every adult around you is frantically debating if you're a medical emergency or tomorrow's front-page headline? Did the nurses actually whisper about crack babies like they were tiny, dangerous oracles of doom? Did your bassinet come with a mixtape? Side A? Warnings? Side B? Judgment? Was the formula laced with caffeine just so you could keep up with all the late-night news specials about your tragic existence? Did you have to grow up faster than a mullet in summer just to dodge being a cautionary tale? And, honestly, how many times can one person hear the phrase war on drugs before you start to think D-A-R-E? Is it just a fever dream? Congratulations, you've just woken up at 1987. Your mom is exhausted, your doctor is panicking, the news is convinced you're doomed, and the only thing more confusing than your future is the plot of Twin Peaks. Good luck. Welcome to the world, little one. It's the late 80s, and the only thing colder than the hospital linoleum is the collective national anxiety swirling outside. Nurses glance at your chart, see the words prenatal cocaine exposure, and suddenly you're less baby, more breaking news segment. You haven't even learned to blink, and already everyone's convinced you're on the express train to most at risk. First things first. The air. It doesn't smell like fresh beginnings. It's a potent cocktail of Lysol, cheap coffee, and hospital stress sweat. Your first breath outside the womb is less miracle of life, more a sniff test at a White House press conference. Somewhere in the distance, a television flickers the local news. The volume is just low enough to miss details, but high enough for you to sense that your arrival has already been framed as a national tragedy. Your very first hat is scratchy. Your first blanket smells faintly of cigarettes, but not the fun kind. These are the ghosts of nervous nurses chain-smoking behind the cafeteria, wondering if you'll start breakdancing or burst into flames. They're not exactly rooting against you, but let's be real. Nobody's betting on valedictorian, class of 2005. Instead, you're the infant equivalent of the canary in the coal mine. Everyone's waiting to see if you chirp, croak, or start rapping "Don't do drugs." If you're lucky, someone on the night shift actually remembers to feed you. If you're less lucky, you're just the topic of tonight's gossip in the nurse's lounge. Did you see bed 7? Poor thing, born addicted. It's so sad. There's a running pool on whether you'll cry all night or just vibrate gently until sunrise. The term crack baby is thrown around as if it's an official diagnosis. A fate worse than being born a New York Mets fan in 1986. You might imagine the maternity ward is a nurturing haven of swaddling and lullabies. Not tonight. Here, your first lullaby is a chorus of worried whispers and the distant screech of a rolling TV cart loaded with VHS tapes labeled cocaine, the silent killer. Doctors pass by, stethoscopes at the ready. bracing themselves for signs of doom. Are you twitchy? Listless? Crying more than seems statistically plausible? Even your hiccup gets charted as a potential symptom. Sneeze? That's probably a press release in the making. And then there's your mother, tired, maybe scared, definitely judged. She's handed more pamphlets than congratulations. Each one is thick with ominous predictions about your future, plus a phone number for social services just in case. The doctor's tone is a combination of stern lecture and mild panic. "We're monitoring your baby closely," he intones, as if you're about to sprout fangs and announce your first words will be Narcotics Anonymous. Of course, none of this makes a lick of sense to you. You just want to sleep, eat, and maybe have your diaper changed by someone with warm hands. But the world outside your little plastic crib is already spinning a story. You're a symptom, a problem, a warning. Headlines have pre-written your autobiography before you've even managed to open both eyes at once. What does the future hold? According to the panic, everything short of spontaneous combustion. Some experts predict you'll never learn to walk. Others think you'll ace crawling, but only backwards. Teachers, social workers, and neighbors are all preparing for the worst. A child doomed by a decade of disco and bad decisions. But as the sun comes up and the janitor swabs the floor for the third time, something quietly revolutionary happens. You keep breathing. You stretch a little. You make that weird baby noise that's halfway between a sneeze and a frog croak. And for a moment, just a moment, the storm outside pauses. You're just a baby, stubbornly, gloriously, impossibly alive, despite everything the world has already decided about you. And that, in this blizzard of panic, is the bravest thing anyone can do. You think you're just in the hospital nursery, but actually, you're starring in a horror story about the future of America. Every rattle is a ticking time bomb, every diaper change is a minor news bulletin, and if a journalist with a bad mustache walks by, congratulations, you're now a statistic with a side of moral outrage. You're swaddled in flannel and institutional worry, lying under fluorescent lights bright enough to signal passing aircraft. The room should be calm, maybe even soothing, a soft parade of nurses and gentle lullabies. Instead, it's a live taping of Dateline, Panic Edition. A newscaster stands outside the window, pointing solemnly at your bassinet as if the nation needs to be alerted every time you hiccup. Around you, the other babies are blissfully ignorant of the circus rolling past their cribs. But you're the star attraction. You're Exhibit A in the war on drugs. The tiny face that's supposed to haunt every congressional hearing and every bored suburban living room. Somewhere, a producer is zooming in for a close-up of your sleeping face, prepping it for a segment called The Lost Generation. Are America's babies already doomed? The adults aren't subtle, they hover, clutching clipboards and glancing at you like you might start reciting the 12 steps at any moment. Nurses whisper as they pass, using words like at-risk and long-term outcome. One nurse peeks into your crib, sees you yawn, and scribbles listless in your chart. You've never had so much medical attention for being tired. Then there's the parade of visitors, social workers, eager interns, stern administrators, each one shuffling in with a new form, a new checklist, a new wave of concern. The pediatrician does his rounds with all the warmth of a weather forecaster predicting a blizzard of doom. Your pulse is measured, your reflexes are poked, your startled response is analyzed. So often you could be auditioning for a role as a haunted marionette, but the real stars are the journalists. They appear with notepads, camera crews, and microphones, shuffling like undertakers at a particularly judgmental wake. They peer through the nursery glass, searching for a shot that will scare viewers into clutching their pearls and voting for stricter sentencing laws. The phrase "crack baby epidemic" is repeated so many times, It might as well be stamped on your forehead. Forget your birth weight. The only number anyone cares about is how many minutes until your story hits the evening news. Let's not forget the subtle soundtrack of this nursery. A constant hum of panic from outside. Televisions in waiting rooms drone on with dire warnings, while tabloids in the gift shop sell headlines about the doomed generation. Even the hospital cafeteria has a special on crisis coffee for exhausted nurses, and possibly a side of moral outrage for dessert. Through it all, your actual needs, food, warmth, comfort, are almost secondary. Your main job is to embody a warning. Each burp is a sign, each nap a potential symptom. The fact that you are, in reality, just a baby? That's the boring part, and America has no interest in boring. Not this year, but here's the plot twist nobody expected. You're still here. You keep doing regular baby things, kicking, gurgling, staring at ceiling tiles with the focus of someone solving a Rubik's Cube. And as the days drag on, the nursery panic doesn't turn into an apocalypse. It just becomes background noise, a distant clatter of headlines, speeches, and expert opinions. In a few weeks, the journalists will pack up their cameras, chasing a new scare, and the world will slowly move on. But the memory of those spotlights lingers. A weird, cold comfort that your first days were shared with a nation of nervous adults and more camera crews than a royal wedding. You won't remember any of it, but somewhere out there, a grainy VHS tape will. Because in the late 1980s, even your nap was newsworthy. And somehow, you survived the hype. The moment the label crack baby lands on your bassinet, it sticks harder than dried oatmeal. Forget the name your parents picked. You are now a symbol, a soundbite, a social experiment in a onesie. No pressure. You didn't ask for this. 1 minute, you're blinking up at the world with that classic new baby confusion. The next, you're a walking, or rather, non-walking cautionary tale. Nurses murmur your label in hushed tones, as if it's your astrological sign. Your parents might have named you something hopeful, something sweet, but the world has other ideas. Your official name, for now, is problem. And here's the thing about labels. They're not gentle. They're not soft and pastel-colored like the wallpaper in your nursery. They're sticky, loud, and occasionally written in permanent marker. Crack baby isn't a diagnosis. It's a warning, a forecast, a weather report for a storm that may never come. You're already defined by what you're supposedly destined to lack. Attention, impulse control, normalcy. Your future is being written in headlines before you even burp on your own. Doctors hover, clipboards at the ready, looking for disaster in every diaper. Each reflex is analyzed like it's the Zapruder film. Did you grasp the nurse's finger? Was it a little slow? That's a symptom. Or maybe you just didn't feel like performing for an audience. But in 1988, crack baby trumps cranky baby every time. The file at the end of your crib doesn't say likely to grow up and have a favorite color. It says high risk for verything. You could discover gravity before lunch, and the world would still be waiting for you to explode. Meanwhile, your parents are stuck in their own loop of judgment. Every glance from a nurse is a silent question. Did you do this? There's an invisible wall between them and the rest of the waiting room, built out of stigma and government-issued pamphlets. In the corner, a social worker scribbles notes with a furrowed brow, ready to recommend interventions before you even have a personality. It's hard to bond with your baby when you're not sure if the state will let you keep them. Outside your hospital room, society is gearing up for a performance of its own. Newspaper columns, talk shows, and public service announcements spin your story into a bedtime story for anxious parents. Behave, or your child could end up like this. You're a bogeyman in a blanket, the stuff of suburban nightmares. The label crack baby becomes shorthand for lost cause, which is convenient for everyone except you. And it's not like the label stays in the nursery. It follows you home, lingers in your medical record, and introduces itself at every pediatrician's visit. Some days, you can almost picture the label sprouting tiny legs and following you to daycare, where teachers already know to watch you closely. The other kids get animal stickers. You get extra notes sent home and the occasional sideways look. In a different era, maybe you would have just been that baby who likes staring at ceiling fans. But this is the age of panic, and your very existence is a social experiment. You're poked, prodded, and measured. Every milestone is a referendum on national policy. Don't talk early? That's the drugs. Talk too early? Must be a fluke. But here's the irony that history loves. You're still here. You wiggle, you smile. You make it through the night just like the other babies. No more fragile, no less stubborn. The label stays, but you start to grow past it, inch by inch, diaper by diaper. Because no label, no matter how loud or sticky, can predict the ordinary miracle of a baby just being a baby. And that's the thing about labels. They only stick if you stop moving, so you keep wriggling, keep gurgling, keep growing, leaving the experts and their permanent markers to play catch-up with your real story. Doctors run tests, furrow brows, and speak in whispers. If you sneeze, it's a symptom. If you yawn, it's a sign. If you sleep through the night, it's probably a clerical error. The prognosis? Gloomier than a Chernobyl weather report. You might think being a newborn would buy you a few months of innocence, but not here, not now, not when every white coat is on high alert for catastrophe. Welcome to your very first apocalypse, starring you, a 6-pound protagonist in a world of worst-case scenarios. Before you even get your hospital bracelet snipped, you've become a science experiment and a cautionary tale. The atmosphere is part hospital, part doomsday bunker. It's so thick with dread you could bottle it and sell it as Ode Anxiety, 1987. Step 1 is testing, endless, relentless, sometimes just for the sake of it testing. Blood pressure, check. Reflexes, double check. Is your cry slightly more piercing than average? Does your foot curl in a way that suggests doom? The nurses log your every burp and hiccup as potential omens. Sometimes it feels less like a nursery and more like a disaster preparedness drill run by people who have only ever read about babies in medical journals and panic magazines. Your mother, exhausted and dazed, is caught in the crossfire of these rounds. For every question she tries to answer, did the baby eat? Did the baby sleep? There are 3 more she can't. The doctors are fishing for symptoms like they're trawling for a Loch Ness monster, desperate to find something, even if it's just a shadow or a hiccup at the wrong time. The phrases failure to thrive and potential neurodevelopmental delay are dropped into the air like confetti. Nobody knows exactly what to look for, but if it's not perfect, it's proof of something sinister. If you squirm, that's agitation. If you're calm, that's worrying passivity. They bring in a specialist, and then another, and suddenly you're the main event at a very grim science fair. Pediatric neurologists gather with clipboards. The social worker pops in, eyes you like you're a crime scene, and leaves behind another stack of forms. Somewhere, someone writes to be monitored in capital letters and underlines it 3 times. And let's talk about your chart, a folder growing thicker than a phone book with every passing hour. It contains enough paperwork to build a small raft and enough medical jargon to terrify a spelling bee champion. Generalized tremor? Could be the blanket is itchy? Abnormal rooting reflex? Or maybe you just wanted to nap. But here, in the diagnostic Hunger Games, normal baby behavior is never just normal. It's a presenting feature, and the more they observe, the more they expect to see. Meanwhile, the media isn't helping. If you're really unlucky, a local reporter is doing a segment right outside, narrating your every sneeze with the gravitas of a weather alert. Some infants, exposed prenatally to drugs, may never. Well, the sentence never quite ends, but the implication is always apocalyptic. It's a lot for someone who hasn't even mastered neck control. All this vigilance would be impressive if it wasn't so exhausting. Your parents are advised to brace for a future of therapy appointments, special schools, and infinite forms. And for you? You're left with the simple job of being a baby. Cry, sleep, eat, repeat, while everyone else scans you for harbingers of doom. The only thing you're actually at risk of right now is being completely misunderstood. And yet, here you are, doing baby things, in a room full of adults obsessed with disaster. It turns out, sometimes the most radical act is surviving anyway. Just a small, squirmy reminder that even in the middle of a medical apocalypse, most babies just want to be babies. You'd think hospitals were a place of healing, but in 1980s America, they're more like airports for rumors. Machines beep, nurses clutch coffee, and everyone's waiting for the moment you either levitate or fail to meet a developmental milestone, whichever comes first. Your first real home isn't a nursery with soft wallpaper and stuffed animals, but a humming, flickering neonatal unit bathed in cold fluorescent light. There's the relentless beep of monitors, your own personal techno soundtrack, and an endless procession of adults who stare at screens like they're decoding the Da Vinci Code. If your heart rate so much as hiccups, 3 people rush over with clipboards and the urgency of airport security when someone leaves a bag unattended. The nurses here are overworked, undercaffeinated, and hypervigilant. They check your vitals as often as some people check their horoscope. You're swaddled in a tangle of wires, patches, and tubes that make you look less like a baby and more like the world's smallest science experiment. Somewhere, a printer whirs out another set of numbers that might as well be ancient hieroglyphs for all anyone seems to understand them. And then there's the communication, or the lack thereof. Hospital life in the 80s is powered by a 3-step cycle. 1. Someone notices something unusual. 2. Everyone speculates wildly. And 3. Nobody explains anything to your parents. The word monitoring gets thrown around more than a set of car keys at a 70s swinger party. Everyone's monitoring something: your pulse, your breathing, your potential for catastrophic failure. Your parents, meanwhile, are left with nothing but vague updates and a rising sense of dread. Every cough is a crisis, every whimper a harbinger of doom. If you sleep too long, someone notes it as unusual lethargy. If you squawk and wriggle, that's increased irritability. The same actions, interpreted a dozen different ways, all feeding into the great rumor mill of 1987. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse whispers to another, "Did you see bed 8? I heard he blinked twice. Might be a sign." It's like the world's most stressful game of telephone. Modern hospitals brag about their state-of-the-art systems, but in the 80s, information is traded like baseball cards. Some doctors still use pages the size of bricks. And when you need a specialist, someone wheels in a television on a cart and pops in a VHS tape titled Infant Reflexes, a crisis story. No one is on the same page. Your mum asks if you're okay, and gets an answer that sounds like a horoscope reading, "The signs are mixed, but we're staying hopeful." If your dad asks for clarification, he's handed a pamphlet and told to wait for the pediatrician, who may or may not be on his lunch break until 2026. But perhaps the most 1980s thing about your hospital stay is the wild power of misinformation. Urban legends about crack babies spread through the halls like the flu. A well-meaning nurse explains to a visiting relative that you might never smile, read, or play. Someone else recalls hearing a radio host say, "Your generation will cost America billions." The hospital grapevine is alive and well, and every link in the chain adds a new layer of alarm. And through all this noise, there you are, just trying to nap. You stretch, yawn, and fart like any normal baby. But every sound gets documented as evidence. Maybe you are the world's smallest catastrophe. Maybe you're just a little gassy. The line between the two is as thin as your hospital wristband. It's easy to forget that the hospital is supposed to be a place of comfort, a soft landing in a rough world. Here, it feels more like the set of a disaster movie. Everyone braced for the next plot twist. Nobody's sure if it's a comedy or a tragedy. But every morning, you wake up anyway. Still kicking, still breathing, still completely unfazed by rumors, monitors, or beeps. And really, that's the only milestone that matters. Congratulations, your first visitors aren't family, they're the press. Someone from Channel 7 wants a shot of your tiny fist, and suddenly your every sneeze is public property. Somewhere, a headline is already forming. America's infants doomed? The hospital's neonatal unit becomes less a place for swaddling and more a stage for a breaking news segment, complete with lights, boom mics, and a team of journalists in matching trench coats. You've barely mastered the art of keeping your eyes open, and now there's a camera flash in your face before you've even met your grandma. Welcome to America, where the only thing faster than gossip is the news cycle. It's not just the local news either. Someone's aunt knows a guy at the paper, and now there's a print journalist too, hovering outside your window, scribbling in a notebook and glancing at you as if you might suddenly reveal the secrets of the universe, or at least blink in a newsworthy way. Nurses scurry by, alternately smoothing your blanket and shooing reporters from the nursery door. A hospital administrator tries to look dignified on camera while blocking the view of the diaper bin. They want footage of your bassinet, your tiny, curled-up hand, maybe a dramatic shot of your hospital ID band for the full tragic innocence effect. The anchor does their best concerned but hopeful voiceover. Will these babies survive the crack epidemic? And what does it mean for the future of our nation? The questions come thick and fast, like it's a game show and you're the mystery prize. You, meanwhile, are utterly unbothered. You nap. You cry. You look cross-eyed at a stuffed giraffe. But the grown-ups are fully committed to their roles. One nurse actually fluffs your blanket for the camera, while a reporter whispers, "Get the one with the cute yawn. It'll play well at 6. If you sneeze, that's breaking news. If you burp, it's a metaphor for societal collapse. Your parents, if they're around, get swept up in the spectacle too." Mom is offered a chance to share her story. Dad is gently prompted to stand by the window for a family shot, holding you up like a living, breathing headline. Reporters gently prod for sound bites. How does it feel knowing your child is the face of a national crisis? No pressure. Back in the editing van, someone is already splicing footage together. They add a slow-motion shot of your hospital bracelet, set it to melancholy piano music, and layer in expert interviews about doom, gloom, and the supposed tragedy of your first sneeze. Somewhere, a concerned anchor clutches a sheaf of notes, ready to segue from you to a story about dangerous playground equipment or the dangers of Halloween candy. But it's not just TV. There are radio spots, newspaper spreads, even magazine articles, most featuring black and white photos and breathless captions. A child at risk. By the end of your first week, you've been used to symbolize everything from the perils of urban life to the moral decay of society. You're a living, breathing headline, a real-life before picture for every hand-wringing editorial in the country. And it's not like you get royalties for any of this. The closest thing to a compensation package is a knitted hat from a well-meaning volunteer and a hospital pacifier that tastes suspiciously like plastic anxiety. You're the subject of national debate, but nobody asks if you want the spotlight. The funny thing is, none of these grown-ups really see you, not the you that wiggles, dreams, or smiles in your sleep. They see a symbol, a story, a warning. They don't see your future, only their fears and projections. Yet every day, you quietly defy the script. You hiccup, you kick, you grow. The cameras eventually leave, chasing a new crisis, a different baby. The nursery lights dim, and you're left in peaceful, if slightly overexposed, silence. Because for all the coverage, all the stories, and all the spectacle, you're still just a baby. And you still get to write your own story, one breath, one nap, and one not-so-newsworthy sneeze at a time. Before you can even say "Mama," the world is pointing fingers at her. The hospital, social worker, the news, the family next door, everyone has an opinion, and none of them are helpful. Mom gets the blame, you get the pity, and both of you get zero sleep. It starts the moment you're born. The nurse in the corner makes a note in your chart, but what she's really documenting is the silent accusation in the air. Someone hands your mum a stack of pamphlets as thick as a phone book, all titled something like "What to Expect When the World Expects the Worst." Each page is a new reminder that everything might go wrong, and that it's probably her fault. In the waiting room, the whispers multiply like dust bunnies. Cousins, aunts, distant relatives, everyone becomes an expert, reciting facts they half remember from TV specials hosted by guys in pastel sweaters. I heard those babies cry all night. Don't they have learning problems? Isn't it contagious? Mom sits quietly, gripping her hospital cup of orange juice, already bracing herself for a lifetime of questions she'll never be able to answer to anyone's satisfaction. At every shift change, a new face appears at her bedside. Social worker, nurse, pediatrician, sometimes all three at once. They ask about her support system, her plans for the future, and how she feels about her choices. The questions are gentle, but they sting. The answers never seem quite right. You can practically see the invisible scorecard hovering above her head. Too sad? Not enough remorse? Too optimistic? Denial? She's living in a bureaucratic escape room, and nobody will give her the key. Meanwhile, in the media, the narrative is set. She's already a character in a national morality play. The addict mother. Her photo, if anyone uses it, shows her looking tired, worried, less than perfect. No one asks if she's scared or if she loves you. No one wonders if she's trying her best. It's much easier to make her the villain, you the victim, and themselves the heroes for caring so much. The doctors aren't immune either. During rounds, they lower their voices and glance at your mother like she's an unsolvable math problem. She can feel the weight of their expectations every time she tries to hold you. Is she doing it wrong? Is she allowed to look happy? Should she apologize for singing to you, for smiling at your tiny fingers? Even outside the hospital, the blame follows. Neighbors offer helpful advice. Strangers in the grocery store give her the double take reserved for people who buy wine before noon. Someone, somewhere, always seems ready to remind her that everything about you is a result of her choices. That every giggle, every cough, every late-night cry is evidence in the case against her. There's an unspoken rule. If something goes wrong, it's her fault. If you're fussy, it's because of her. If you're quiet, it's because of her. If you're perfect, well, must have been a fluke. Your dad, if he's around, is either background noise or occasionally a tragic footnote. But Mom, she's the main character in the drama of your diagnosis. And the critics are never silent. But here's what the critics miss. Every day, she holds you, feeds you, sings to you when the nurses have gone and the only audience is the quiet, humming machines. She weathers every sideways glance, every awkward pause, every insinuation that she's failed. And you don't notice any of it. You just want comfort, warmth, and someone to laugh when you make your first ridiculous noise. History is full of finger pointers. But your mom is still here, still showing up, still loving you, even when the whole world insists it knows better. The real scandal isn't what she did. It's how much she cares. In a world determined to blame her for things far beyond her control. And somehow, through the guilt and the pity, the two of you keep going, sleep-deprived, maybe, but stubborn, together. Withdrawal is no joke. especially when your soundtrack is a chorus of crying babies and nervous nurses. Your first lullabies are interrupted by worried glances and medical jargon that sounds suspiciously like someone reciting tax codes. Welcome to the neonatal unit's greatest hits. The Crying in Stereo compilation, featuring such classics as The Wail Next Door, Nurse Pacing in B minor, and the ever-popular Is That My Baby or Someone Else's. You are, through no fault of your own, an involuntary backup singer in the world's least relaxing choir. The lights are bright, the air's chilly, and the only thing more relentless than your own discomfort is the sound of everyone else's. Nurses walk the halls in a kind of jittery ballet. They try to soothe you, bouncing, rocking, patting, sometimes doing the slow shuffle of sleep deprivation that would make any 3 a.m. parent proud. One nurse hums a tune under her breath, maybe for your benefit, maybe for hers. She checks your diaper, then your IV, then sighs and makes another note in your chart. Persistent fussiness. You're not even sure what fussiness is yet, but apparently you're already a repeat offender. Around you, a rotating cast of tiny roommates fill the air with their own stories. One has hiccups that echo off the walls. Another is working on their second hour of uninterrupted shrieking. Everyone's got a style. Some prefer the soft, whimpery approach. Others are full-on, no-holds-barred sirens, like they're auditioning for a role in an opera called Pharmaceutical Regret. The sound bounces off the linoleum, mingling with the hum of machines and the soft murmur of doctors plotting their next caffeine run. Meanwhile, your own body is staging its protest. Shakes, sneezes, strange little jitters. Sometimes you cry for reasons even you don't understand. Sometimes you want to be held, and sometimes nothing feels right. Not the blanket, not the bottle, not even the rocking chair with the slightly suspicious stain. Your skin is a bit too sensitive. Your stomach isn't sure what to do. You're uncomfortable in a way that can't be solved by a lullaby or a new onesie. The nurses do what they can. They dim the lights, offer pacifiers, and try every trick in the book. Swaddling, unswaddling, a gentle sway, a soothing shush. None of it is quite enough to take the edge off. Occasionally, someone tries a music box that plays Brahms' lullaby on an endless loop. After the 10th repetition, it's less a comfort and more a gentle threat. And then come the rounds, that parade of adults in white coats, asking your exhausted caregivers about symptom scales and withdrawal protocols. They say things like autonomic dysregulation and hypertonia, which, as far as you can tell, are grown-up words for this baby is having a rough day. They bring charts, flow sheets, and that one very thick reference manual that always seems to land with a thud on the counter. They debate if you need more comfort or more observation. Spoiler, you'd prefer a nap. For your parents, it's an emotional marathon. Mom is stuck between worry and guilt. Dad, if he's around, jumps at every beep. No one sleeps. The staff keeps encouraging them. It's normal. It will pass. But the clock on the wall seems to move backward, and relief is always just one more night away. Still, even in the middle of this exhaustion, something amazing happens. A nurse leans over, smiles, and says, "You're stronger than you look." You grip her finger, and for a moment the crying fades, the machines hush, and the world feels a little less overwhelming, because that's the secret. Even in a room full of worries, full of beeping machines and tired adults, you're still here, still fighting. Your cry is proof, not of failure, not of weakness, but of stubborn, impossible life. And in a place where silence is rare, every little noise you make is a small act of survival. Enter the social worker, armed with clipboards, pamphlets, and a look of deep concern. They ask a lot of questions and leave behind paperwork. You may not know your ABCs yet, but you're already learning the alphabet of bureaucracy. The social worker's entrance is never subtle. There's a certain hush that falls in the room, the way air shifts before a thunderstorm. Your parents, already jumpy, stiffen in their chairs. As the social worker introduces herself with a businesslike smile and a handshake meant to signal "trust me," she glances at you, tiny, swaddled, definitely not filling out any forms on your own yet, and then starts asking questions in a tone usually reserved for suspects on a police procedural. Do you have a support system? Are you aware of available resources? Has anyone in your household ever felt overwhelmed, anxious, or possibly hungry in the last 6 months? She scribbles notes with a pen that has its own special click of authority. You're pretty sure she could recite your entire family tree before you've even burped. Out come the pamphlets, stacks of them, printed on pastel paper, covering every topic from coping with stress to how to swaddle without crying. There's one for substance use, one for infant bonding, and several that seem to be mostly clip art and bullet points about community resources. Your parents nod and smile politely, slowly drowning in a sea of helpful advice. The social worker is, theoretically, here to help, but her visits have the effect of a tornado drill. Everyone acts on their best behavior, says the right things, and wonders nervously what's going on in the background. Your mom fidgets with your hat, your dad clears his throat, and both try to remember if there are any skeletons, real or metaphorical, in the closet that might come up during this inquisition. Meanwhile, you, being the star of this bureaucratic ballet, do what you do best. You stare into the middle distance, yawn theatrically, and drool on your blanket. The social worker jots something down, possible listlessness, monitor for lethargy, and just like that, your nap becomes official business. She asks about routines and feeding schedules, and your parents offer the best answers they can, secretly hoping there isn't a wrong answer to how often do you change the baby. Every so often, the social worker tries to inject warmth. "You're doing a great job," she says with the enthusiasm of someone who's practiced it in the mirror. She offers to connect the family with a local support group, a food pantry, and, just in case, a parenting class that meets in a church basement every third Tuesday at 7 p.m. No one has ever looked more exhausted by the idea of help. And let's not forget the paperwork. Forms appear out of nowhere. Consent to share information, permission to follow up, checkboxes for concerns, observations, and recommendations. Each one requires signatures, initials, and a level of concentration your parents haven't mustered since they last filled out their taxes. You may not be able to hold a crayon, but your name is already on half a dozen official records. Somewhere in all this, the social worker slips in the million-dollar question, "Do you feel safe at home?" Your parents answer, but the air is thick with worry. They know that the fate of your next weeks, months, or even years could hinge on a single misunderstood response or a box checked in haste. Still, as she packs up, the social worker assures everyone that she's available any time, leaving a business card and a trail of pastel brochures. You're left with a head full of questions, mostly about milk. Your parents are left with a headache, and your medical file is now heavy enough to double as a doorstop. But that's life in the neonatal ward, 1980s style, where help is always available, probably, and the first language you ever learn is bureaucracies. If your family situation is complicated, welcome to the game of foster care. Every placement is a spin of the wheel. Will your new home smell like cookies or mothballs? Will your foster parent remember your name? Or just call you that one? The process begins before you can even sit up. A hospital caseworker comes in with a clipboard, using phrases like transition plan and placement options in the same tone most people reserve for discussing weather patterns. You, of course, are completely uninformed. Your main concerns at the moment are milk, sleep, and why the ceiling tiles always look slightly suspicious. But the adults are abuzz with decisions, and, like it or not, you're about to take your first spin on the foster care wheel of fortune. If you're lucky, your new foster home is warm, stocked with formula, and features an adult who's memorized your name and is genuinely excited to see you. There might be soft blankets, a mobile above the crib, maybe even a lullaby or two. Sometimes there's an older foster sibling who takes you under their wing, or a well-meaning dog who keeps your feet warm during naps. You score the jackpot. Cookies in the oven, hugs on demand, and a general sense that someone is, for once, happy you exist. But that's not always the spin you get. Sometimes your foster home smells less like cookies and more like a thrift store's lost and found. There's a distinct aroma of, "What is that?" in the air, and your foster parent runs through a list of names. Was it Jamie, Jordan, before landing reluctantly on yours? If they call you kiddo or the baby, you know you're just a temporary visitor in a long line of temporary visitors. Then there's the stuff. Hand-me-down toys that have already lived 3 lifetimes, mystery stains on the onesie, and an impressive collection of mismatched socks. You discover the world of social workers in rotation, each one with a slightly different definition of permanent, each promising to check in real soon. Your main goal is simple: adapt, survive. Try to keep your head down when the grown-ups are doing their serious talk in the kitchen. Transitions are the hardest part. Just as you've gotten used to the creaky stairs or the sound of a foster parent's favorite game show, it's time to move again. New house, new faces, new set of family rules. Sometimes you get a cheerful welcome. Sometimes you get a set of eyes that say, "Please don't break anything, including my schedule." Each move means another round of explanations to the school nurse. Another set of baby photos tucked into a folder labeled "For records only." The holidays? That's a roll of the dice too. Will you spend Thanksgiving eating stuffing at a long, crowded table? Or will it be chicken nuggets in front of the TV? Some years you land in a home with elaborate holiday decorations and a determined attempt at family. Other times it's a single, blinking string of lights and a wish for quieter nights. But for all the chaos, the not knowing, the switching of rooms and rules, there's something quietly heroic about the way you carry on. Kids are nothing if not adaptable. You learn to make friends fast, laugh at the weirdness, and find comfort wherever you can, whether that's a teddy bear, a friendly neighbor, or just the knowledge that, for tonight at least, you have a bed and someone checking in on you. You never know if the next spin will bring you stability or another round of introductions, but you keep playing anyway, because in the grand game of foster care roulette, persistence is your superpower, and sometimes that's the only prize you need. You're a toddler now, but the whispers don't stop. Teachers glance at your file, neighbors trade theories, and even the school nurse watches you like you might break into interpretive dance at any moment. You toddle through the world with a sippy cup in one hand and a full serving of suspicion in the other. Every scraped knee is a symptom, every giggle a minor miracle, and your preschool cubby could practically have a little sign: "Handle with speculation." Forget about being just another kid in the sandbox. You're the unofficial mascot for every grown-up's lingering worries about the 1980s. Teachers study you from the moment you waddle into class, clutching your crayon masterpiece. You can almost see them mentally reviewing your history. The label on your records glows brighter than the exit sign. Are you fidgety? That must be the prenatal exposure. Too quiet? They make a note for the child study team. Too loud? A case study for a future parent-teacher conference. You're living in a never-ending episode of This American Life. Except every act is about you. And nobody asked your permission for the interview. At home, the saga continues. Neighbors lean in a little closer when your family walks by. "He looks normal, doesn't he? Are you sure she's all right?" As if your developmental progress is the local spectator sport. It's possible the neighborhood association has a betting pool about which milestone you'll hit next, or whether you'll accidentally expose a deep-seated flaw in America's optimism. Then there's the school nurse, who has seen it all: chicken pox, mystery rashes, questionable lunches, but keeps an especially close eye on you. At every sniffle, she raises an eyebrow. If you so much as cough, it's charted, graphed, and sent home with a warning. You have a reserved seat in her office, somewhere between the asthma inhalers and the lost and found bin. She's convinced she'll be the first to spot the scandalous sign that everyone keeps whispering about. Your parents try to build a normal life for you, but normal is a moving target. At every turn, well-meaning adults offer unsolicited advice, extra vitamins, special programs, new therapies just in case. Sometimes it feels like you're growing up inside a research study that never ends, one where every success is a fluke and every failure is, naturally, proof of the original panic. Birthday parties, playdates, even school pictures come with a side of sideways glances. Some parents hover, waiting for you to act out, while others pull their kids closer, just in case crack baby is contagious. You could be juggling flaming pineapples, and half the grown-ups would only see the danger, never the talent. And yet, you're still just a kid. You chase bubbles, lose socks, eat paste, and demand to wear the same shirt 4 days in a row. The world keeps looking for signs of trouble, but you're mostly concerned with whether snack time will feature animal crackers or, fingers crossed, the holy grail of chocolate pudding. Somehow, you learn to find humor in the spectacle. If people are going to watch you, you might as well give them a show. You perfect the art of the dramatic nap and the occasional fake limp for sympathy, or an extra sticker. You become the Houdini of hide and seek, master of the who, me, innocent look, and undefeated champion of the school's duck-duck-goose circuit. It's not always easy growing up under the microscope, but eventually you realize the shadows only stretch so far. Labels fade, gossip grows stale, and the world finds new scandals to chase. And you? You just keep growing, one snack, one giggle, and one suspicious nurse's note at a time. Turns out, being born during a moral panic means people expect you to spontaneously combust by second grade. Every playground stumble is proof of a national crisis. And every time you forget your lunch, someone blames the crack. You get used to the scrutiny early. The adults are always watching. They check your eyes for signs of trouble, your shoelaces for existential despair, your math homework for symptoms of doom. It's a little like living in a reality show you never auditioned for, one where every scraped knee and untied shoe is an episode of Can America Survive the 80s? And your personal storyline is always up for debate. At school, the legend only grows. Teachers read your file with a sigh and a bracing cup of coffee. If you daydream in class, it's not imagination, it's a processing issue. If you run too fast at recess, it's impulse control. You're basically a walking case study. And your mere existence gives the school psychologist job security. Forget regular spelling tests. Your big test is whether you turn out normal, exceptional, or proof positive that society was right to panic. On the playground, kids pick up on the vibes even if they don't get the details. Some avoid you, just in case moral panic is contagious, while others are convinced you have superpowers, or at least a wild backstory. You become the one from the news, even if your only brush with fame was having your baby picture on a bulletin board at the pediatrician's office. If you mess up in kickball, someone mutters, "Well, you know," as if the crack is the new explanation for bad aim. Your parents can't escape the myth, either. At every parent-teacher conference, there's a moment when the teacher leans in, voice hushed, and says, given their history as if the punchline is always lurking just behind your next report card. Relatives trade articles about new studies, nodding grimly as they pass the mashed potatoes. If you have a meltdown at Thanksgiving, there's a brief, awkward silence before someone reassures the table. It's not his fault, and the experts. Every year brings a new round of advice. Be extra patient. Watch for behavioral cues. Encourage social interaction, but not too much. You could fill a bookshelf with the recommendations, and still no one agrees on what you're supposed to be like. or what the right outcome even is. You're the moral panic that just keeps giving, a moving target for every worried adult. Meanwhile, you're busy being a kid, which is its own full-time job. You collect rocks, scrape elbows, invent complicated games with rules that change every 5 minutes. Some days, you're a space explorer. Other days, you're just hoping for a chocolate pudding cup at lunch. Your greatest ambition is to trade fruit snacks, not become a national headline. Still, the myth persists. Every new study, every alarmist news segment, every concerned adult you meet adds another layer to the story. You become the measuring stick for all that's supposedly gone wrong in America. The warning label that walks and talks and sometimes forgets where they put their backpack. But here's the truth that never makes the evening news. You're still here. You stumble, you grow, you learn. Your failures are just regular childhood, not a harbinger of societal collapse. Your successes? Not miracles. Just proof that most people, given a chance, will rise to meet life as it comes. And in the end, the myth of the doomed generation is just that, a myth. You turn out mostly fine, mostly ordinary, and occasionally exceptional, just like every other kid who had to grow up in the glare of the public's anxious headlights. And that, in itself, is a quiet sort of miracle. You'd think school is about learning, but for you, it's a gauntlet of extra meetings, special screenings, and a permanent seat in the let's keep an eye on that one row. Education, now with extra side-eye. From the very first day, your experience is more science fair project than schoolhouse rock. Before you even master tying your shoes, you're already on a first-name basis with the school psychologist. There are more meetings about you than there are about the school lunch budget. And trust me, the lunch budget is a scandal in its own right. Your file has its own little manila folder, thick enough to use as a doorstop, and is stamped with enough red ink to make a Soviet bureaucrat jealous. Teachers eye you like a cat watching a wobbly vase. They're never quite sure if you're going to shine or shatter, so they brace for both. Your reading group is carefully curated. Your math progress is graphed monthly. And every time you sharpen your pencil, someone somewhere wonders if it's a coping mechanism. You get invited to special screenings. Vision, hearing, mysterious tests involving blocks and pictures of apples. More often than most kids get called to the principal's office. Sometimes you suspect they're just running out of new things to test. You have a learning plan, which in theory is supposed to help, but mostly seems to involve more people sitting around tiny tables discussing your potential. You get pulled out of class for interventions and enrichment, for assessments and reassessments, for just checking in. Sometimes it feels like your entire academic career is just one big observation period. It's not just the teachers, other students notice too. You're the kid who leaves class for mysterious appointments, who sometimes comes back with a new sticker or a blank stare, depending on how many flashcards you had to survive that day. Your friends ask why you're always meeting with the special teacher, and you learn early that the best answer is to shrug and talk about something else, like, say, dinosaurs, or which cafeteria food is most likely to bounce. Parent-teacher conferences become a full-fledged summit. Your parents brace themselves for updates, never quite sure if this meeting will be a celebration, a negotiation, or a warning that you need more support. Every conversation starts with given their background and ends with, but we're optimistic. The optimism is nice, but the background looms larger than life. There's a whole cast of well-meaning specialists. Speech therapists, occupational therapists, counselors, each with their own toolbox, checklist, and motivational sticker chart. They speak in code. Emerging, borderline, of concern. You could fill a bingo card with all the jargon. Resilient, at risk, highly distractible. Bingo, you win a few more months of monitoring. And through it all, You try to just be a kid. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't. Some days, you forget about the stairs and the files and the extra tests and just focus on spelling caterpillar right. Other days, the weight of being that one presses down, and you wonder if everyone else's school days come with this much paperwork and whispered speculation. But you keep going. You master your multiplication tables, even if it takes a little longer. You draw a picture so detailed, your teacher forgets, for a moment, to worry about your attention span. You run the fastest lap at recess, and nobody comments on your gross motor development. There are small victories, days when the only thing anyone notices is your laugh echoing in the hall. Stigma has a long memory, but childhood has a stubborn streak. So you keep showing up, keep learning, keep surprising everyone, including yourself. Education, after all, isn't just about what you're taught. It's about what you refuse to let define you. And sometimes, the best lesson is just refusing to sit quietly in the let's keep an eye on that one row. Somewhere around the time you're learning to tie your shoes, researchers realize the early predictions were a little dramatic. Oops, you're still here, still you, and apparently your biggest issue is the cafeteria food, not your neurons. It's a plot twist worthy of an after-school special. For years, the experts had charted your every move, predicting catastrophe with the same certainty as a weather forecaster on cable TV. But now, here comes a fresh crop of scientists, clutching studies, pie charts, and an air of sheepish confusion. Suddenly, the dire warnings are replaced by cautious optimism, or, at the very least, needs more research. It's not the apology you deserve, but hey, it's the closest you'll get. You sense the shift even if you don't understand it. The adults get quieter at meetings. The specialists' visits become less frequent. Where there used to be monthly check-ins and daily clipboard sightings, now you mostly get weighed, measured, and occasionally quizzed about your favorite dinosaur. The testing continues, but with less urgency. More like a doctor checking your reflexes out of habit, not panic. School picks up on the vibe. Teachers look at you with a new mix of curiosity and awkwardness. They're not quite ready to drop the extra screenings. But now they say things like, "You're really doing well," with a surprise that's hard to hide. Gone are the dire prophecies about your attention span or your academic doom. Now it's just watching for growth and tracking progress, which is basically educational code for let's see what happens. At home, your parents read new headlines. Crack baby crisis. Overstated. Experts admit. Your mum cuts out the article and sticks it on the fridge, a small, wrinkled trophy for a battle nobody wanted to fight. Relatives who used to ask nervous questions now just nod and bring over cookies. The only thing that hasn't changed is the cafeteria menu, which remains a bigger threat to your long-term development than anything in your medical file. The news moves on, as it always does. There's a new crisis to worry about, a new generation supposedly at risk. You quietly get promoted from doomed to unexpectedly normal. Not exactly headline material, but a relief all the same. The panic around you starts to seem ridiculous in hindsight. Was anyone ever really expecting you to sprout tentacles or spontaneously combust in the third-grade talent show? Apparently, yes. But that's yesterday's problem. The best part? You get to just be a kid, finally, almost. You find out that tying your shoes is actually pretty hard, and so is long division. Sometimes you forget your homework, not because of prenatal exposure, but because it's boring and you'd rather build a fort. You get in trouble for passing notes, not for any scientific reason, just because you like making your friends laugh. You realize the truth. Nobody really knows what's coming next. Not the experts, not the parents, not even you. Childhood isn't an experiment. It's a day-to-day improvisation, full of surprises, mistakes, and the occasional miracle. The scientists pack up their charts and go home. But you're still here, still living, still figuring it out. In the end, the reality check is a relief. You're not a cautionary tale, a headline, or a lab rat. You're a kid. Sometimes weird, sometimes wonderful, always unpredictable. And the real test isn't in the data. It's in every ordinary, extraordinary day you get to keep proving people wrong. Turns out, the biggest risk was underestimating you. Every family has secrets, but yours comes with a media angle. Holidays mean awkward questions, forced cheer, and that one relative who definitely read something in Newsweek. You could be forgiven for thinking Thanksgiving is just about turkey, mashed potatoes, and pretending to like canned cranberry sauce. But in your house, it's a delicate dance performed around the shadow of that article. The one about crack babies, or America's doomed generation, or some other headline that, by pure coincidence, ran the year you were born. It's never brought up directly, of course. That would be too easy. Instead, it hovers over the dining table, as present as the gravy boat and twice as slippery. The awkwardness begins long before dinner is served. It starts with the phone call inviting everyone over. We'd love to have you, and don't worry, we're not judging. You arrive with your parents, bracing for another round of subtle investigations disguised as small talk. Aunt Sharon, the reigning champion of passive-aggressive concern, immediately offers you extra helpings of sweet potatoes and just happens to mention a very interesting program she saw on TV about kids overcoming difficult beginnings. She smiles too wide and asks if you're keeping up in school, her eyes lingering a moment too long. Uncle Ron, who once fell asleep watching a 60-minute special on the crack epidemic, weighs in with a rambling story about how he knew a kid once, never turned out right. He never quite looks you in the eye. But the message is clear. Grandma tries to keep the peace by stuffing everyone with more food. Eat, you'll need your strength, she says, like Thanksgiving is a medical trial you're being prepared for. The conversation moves in circles. Your family is an improv troupe, expertly tiptoeing around specifics while poking at the edges. We're just so grateful everyone's healthy, someone says, glancing at you as if you might suddenly develop a visible symptom. There's a moment every year when your parents lock eyes across the table, silently negotiating who has to answer the next thinly veiled question about your development. You try to steer things toward neutral topics, sports, weather, a pie chart about which cousin is most likely to drop their plate, but it's like walking through a minefield in bunny slippers. Even a discussion about school can take a hard turn. How are your grades? Are you making friends? Have you ever considered extra tutoring? Every answer is scrutinized for secret signs of disaster or resilience. Somehow, the family photo becomes an accidental documentary. There's always a relative trying to capture the real you, just in case something instructive happens, like you recite the alphabet backwards or eat 3 rolls in a row. In the background, your parents are quietly heroic, deflecting, laughing, occasionally redirecting the subject with a well-timed, "Who wants more gravy?" But the real secret, the one nobody talks about, is that you're just normal. Or at least as normal as any kid forced to answer probing questions about their feelings between bites of stuffing. You roll your eyes at dad's jokes, debate pie flavors with cousins, and sneak an extra cookie when you think nobody's watching. Sometimes, you even forget about your unofficial role as the family's special guest star in the drama of the decade. The day ends, as all holidays do, with leftovers, half-finished puzzles, and the slow relief of returning to regular life. You survived another round of forced cheer and whispered concerns. Your secret is safe, for now, tucked away with the other family legends, only trotted out on special occasions. The truth is, every family hides something. Yours just happens to come with a media echo and a cast of anxious relatives. And that's okay, because with every passing year, the questions get softer, the headlines fade, and you get better at finding the humor in the awkwardness. Family secrets may linger, but so does family. Awkward, nosy, and, in their own weird way, rooting for you all along. You're not just living in the 1980s, you're starring in it. Your existence is referenced on talk shows, in sitcom jokes, and after-school specials. Congratulations, you're a plot device. Forget about baby books or family photo albums. Your early years are basically a media montage. Somewhere, there's a TV producer scripting a very special episode about your life. The host's hair is big, the sweater is pastel, and the concern is dialed up to 11. Tonight, on a very special Growing Pains, we meet a child born in the crack epidemic. Can love heal what society cannot? Cue the dramatic music and the slow zoom on your innocent face. Cartoons, meanwhile, are supposed to be your safe haven. But even Saturday morning isn't immune. The ads between commercial breaks are sprinkled with PSAs. Cartoon bears sternly warn about bad choices, and a friendly robot points at the screen, promising that winners don't do drugs. You're left wondering if the Care Bears are about to stage an intervention during nap time. Your parents do their best to shield you. But it's not easy when every channel is running some kind of national emergency. Babies in Crisis segment. Morning radio shows crack jokes about crack babies between weather updates and Madonna songs. It's a weird, surreal kind of fame. Like being the most famous person in your neighborhood that nobody wants to trade baseball cards for. At school, even your classmates have caught on. Someone's older sibling saw a TV report and now, in the lunch line, you're fielding awkward questions. Can you see through walls? Do you get extra time on spelling tests because of the drugs? You learn early how to laugh things off, to roll your eyes with the confidence of someone who's already been written up by 3 different screenwriters and a concerned PTA. The movies aren't much kinder. If a child character is troubled, there's a good chance someone will hint about the mother's history, as if your very existence comes with a dramatic backstory and a suspenseful soundtrack. Your first brush with the big screen isn't as a Disney sidekick, but as a shadowy subplot in the cautionary tale of the year. And let's not forget the music. Just as you start to get into catchy tunes, the radio is full of songs about struggle, survival, and the streets. Some pop stars make earnest charity singles, while others rap about a world you're supposedly the poster child for. You're barely out of diapers, and already you're a metaphor in someone else's lyric sheet. Your parents field questions from neighbors who just want to help. Did you see that thing on Oprah? I heard there's a new therapy program. Have you thought about it? Family friends suddenly know everything about child development, thanks to an article in Time and a segment on 20/20. There's a subtle expectation that you'll be either a cautionary tale or an inspirational comeback. But never just a kid who likes dinosaurs and pudding cups. Pop culture panic doesn't discriminate. It sticks to your shoes like gum and trails behind you into middle school. There's always a new TV special, a late-night punchline, or a tabloid cover featuring a dramatic photo of a baby with a furrowed brow and a caption about America's ticking time bomb. But here's the secret they never show on TV. You're still living your own story, day by day. You outgrow the headlines, the PSAs, and the punchlines. The only soundtrack that really matters is the one in your head. Usually the theme from DuckTales, played at maximum volume, and by the time the next panic hits the airwaves, you're still here, not a plot device but a survivor, with a sharper sense of humor, a thicker skin, and a deep understanding of how weird it is to be famous for something you never actually did. For you, growing up means a parade of professionals. Pediatricians, psychologists, developmental specialists, each with their own theory, most involving more appointments and not nearly enough lollipops. From the start, your calendar looks less like a kid's and more like a minor celebrity's press tour. You're not sure if you're being raised or managed. Monday is for pediatric checkups. Tuesday, you're off to the speech pathologist, who asks you to say banana 8 different ways, Wednesday brings occupational therapy, a room full of sensory bins and stress balls that you're apparently supposed to interact with instead of just launching across the room. And then there are the specialists, neurologists, feeding therapists, child psychologists, each one adding another layer to your growing file. They have titles you can't pronounce and credentials longer than most bedtime stories. They all want to know about your milestones, your moods, your favorite crayon color, and, occasionally, your thoughts on gravity. Their offices are a strange mix of soothing pastels and ominous anatomical charts. The waiting rooms are filled with toys missing most of their wheels, outdated magazines, and a particular brand of nervous parent energy. Each appointment is an adventure. Sometimes you're met with a beaming receptionist and a sticker for your trouble. Other times, it's just a long wait, a cold stethoscope, and an aisle. Need to see you again in 2 weeks. Every cough is logged, every fidget is analyzed, and every answer you give is another puzzle piece in someone's elaborate developmental trajectory flowchart. If you sit still, they call you shy. If you bounce, they recommend further evaluation. The pediatrician is perhaps the most familiar face, a kind of recurring character in the sitcom of your childhood. They measure, they prod, they listen to your heart and ask about your sleep. Your answers are honest, if unhelpful. You sleep badly, but you nap like a champion in math class. No one laughs. They circle things on their clipboard and send you on to the next expert. Therapists bring a new level of vocabulary into your life. You learn terms like gross motor delay and processing speed long before you understand fractions. One day, the speech therapist asks you to repeat silly words. The next, you're building towers out of blocks while someone times you. Just part of the assessment, they say, as if timing your Lego skills is the key to unlocking the secrets of your future. If you drop a block, it's potentially significant. If you build the tallest tower, it's unexpectedly advanced. There is no middle ground. And the paperwork. Every visit comes with a forest's worth of forms. Your parents fill out checklists, circle symptoms, and rate your attention span on a scale of 1 to 10. You're not sure what executive function is, but apparently yours is being closely monitored by an entire committee. Despite the impressive cast of medical characters, there's very little actual magic. No doctor waves a wand and makes things simple. The best you get is a pat on the head, a flavorless lollipop, or, if you're really lucky, a cool bandage for your trouble, but you adapt. You learn to spot the difference between a routine follow-up and an urgent referral. You become an expert at waiting rooms, an aficionado of fish tanks and elevator music. You perfect your I'm fine answers and develop a secret appreciation for the rare professional who actually listens when you talk about dinosaurs. In the end, it's not the labels, the diagnoses, or the appointments that define you. It's the persistence, the way you keep showing up, keep growing, keep living, even when it feels like you're just one chart away from being a full-time research subject. And if you ever get tired, well, at least you know you'll have another appointment to discuss it. You reach elementary school, where you're just trying to trade fruit roll-ups. But instead you get a police officer warning you about the dangers of, well, you. Nothing says self-esteem like being the living embodiment of a public service announcement. Welcome to the golden era of stranger danger and anti-drug assemblies, where mascots in sunglasses hand out just say no buttons, and your weekly curriculum includes coloring in a cartoon police dog with an inexplicable six-pack. The DARE program is in full swing, and your classroom is ground zero for America's moral crusade. You're still learning multiplication tables, but the adults are convinced you need a crash course in personal responsibility, civil obedience, and the complex geopolitics of playground snacks. Every month, the school auditorium fills with nervous energy and the smell of fresh linoleum. The principal introduces Officer Friendly, who rolls in with a plastic badge, a holster full of stickers, and the earnest gravity of someone about to explain why your entire future hinges on saying no to peer pressure. He talks about the dangers of crack cocaine, and as the only kid in the room with a rumor-laden history, you feel the spotlight slowly melting your Velcro sneakers. All you want is to blend in, but the grown-ups keep handing you a starring role. The lesson plans are a minefield. You're handed a worksheet asking you to list ways to make healthy choices. Your classmates fill in things like eat apples and don't push on the swings. Your pencil hovers. Is be born to different parents an acceptable answer? You settle for never run in the hallways and hope for partial credit. Sometimes the lessons get personal. There's a round table about making good decisions, and suddenly you're the expert no one asked for. Billy, what do you think would happen if someone brought drugs to school? The room turns to you as if you have insider knowledge. You fumble for an answer, aware that every adult in earshot is taking notes. The school library is stocked with DARE comics, after-school specials, and thick binders labeled resources for at-risk youth. You find yourself in a real-life, choose-your-own-adventure. Page 4. You decline a cigarette and become student of the month. Page 6. You take a mystery pill and are immediately featured on the evening news. The librarians smile kindly, but you sense they're watching for signs of trouble, just in case you spontaneously combust into a cautionary tale between chapters. Even your parents are recruited into the battle. They attend family engagement nights where they are shown graphs, terrifying statistics, and a video that appears to be acted out entirely by community theatre volunteers in mullets and acid-washed jeans. The take-home message: vigilance, hope, and a healthy suspicion of every backpack. You try your best to ignore it all, but the DARE assemblies stick with you. Sometimes, you catch yourself reciting the pledge in your head while passing the vending machine. Sometimes you wonder if every bad day is a sign you're falling into the wrong crowd. Sometimes, you just wish someone would talk about dinosaurs again. The irony, of course, is that while you're being drafted into the war on drugs, all you want is to ace the spelling test and get picked for dodgeball. But the adults can't seem to see past the myth. For them, you're a risk, a project, a talking point. For yourself, you're just a kid, trying to be different for all the usual reasons, because that's what childhood is for. And in the end, being different is your superpower, even if it comes with a few too many stickers and more than your fair share of awkward glances from Officer Friendly. You want to be normal, but childhood is a minefield of misunderstanding. Some kids are kind, some are cruel, and one or two will ask if you're contagious. Hint, you're not, but your sarcasm is. At recess, the playground is an obstacle course of alliances and anxieties. On a good day, you're just another kid building lopsided sandcastles and seeing how high you can swing before the yard monitor yells at you. On a bad day, you're the main attraction in the rumor carnival, subject of speculation, caution, or, if you're lucky, a new round of wild, inaccurate nicknames. One week you're crack baby, next week you're science kid. And by Friday you're just the weird one with the good lunch snacks. You learn quickly who's safe. The kind kids are easy to spot. The ones who share their extra fruit snacks let you cut in line for kickball, or defend you in the bathroom line when someone makes a snide comment about problem children. Their superpower is the casual shrug, the so what attitude that turns your medical history into a non-issue before you can even blush. With them, you're free to argue about cartoons and whose turn it is on the tire swing, just the usual glorious chaos of elementary school. But kindness isn't a universal language. Some classmates are less generous. They whisper, stare, invent stories that somehow always involve you and a laboratory. You overhear a group speculating that your hair is curly because of the drugs. Someone else says their mum warned them not to get too close, just in case. You consider informing them that, statistically, they're far more likely to catch chickenpox from the water fountain than anything from you. But you sense your scientific wit might not land. Then there are the true artists of cruelty, the bullies. They wield words like daggers, finding soft spots you didn't know you had. They test the limits of the teacher's patience and your own endurance, calling you names or excluding you from group projects. Sometimes their creativity is almost impressive. One particularly dedicated kid spends a whole week pretending to interview you for a TV special about bad kids. You'd rate his journalism skills? C-, needs more research. Despite the landmines, you survive, mostly because of the heroes, the occasional friend who stands up for you when nobody else will, the big kid who scares off the bullies with a glare or a well-timed joke, the teacher who, instead of calling you out, quietly praises your clever answer or ignores the latest playground drama in favor of moving on with the lesson. These are the small kindnesses that make the difference. The lunch shared, the seat saved on the bus, the whispered "don't listen to them" as you line up for class. It's not all high drama, though. Sometimes the confusion works in your favor. When you realize that the kids spreading rumors about you are the same ones who believe in Bloody Mary and swear their older cousin met a real ninja, you start to relax. Your sarcasm becomes your shield, your humor a way to flip the script. One day, when asked for the 100th time if you feel weird, you reply, deadpan. Only when I eat cafeteria meatloaf. The laughter earns you a new friend and, oddly enough, a reputation for being the funny kid. Slowly, you find your place. You gather a tribe, not the biggest or the loudest, but the ones who see you for who you are, not who the world said you'd be. The awkward moments fade, replaced by inside jokes, shared secrets, and the quiet, stubborn resilience that comes from navigating a minefield and still finding something to laugh about. In the end, childhood isn't about labels or rumors. It's about survival, camaraderie, and the occasional hero who reminds you that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just keep showing up, day after day, sarcasm and all. Surprise! Despite all the dire predictions, you mostly just want to ride your bike, watch cartoons, and survive gym class. It's almost like you're a regular kid if everyone would just chill out for 5 seconds. Life, it turns out, isn't lived on a spreadsheet or inside the anxious imagination of a social worker. Your average day is less about defying the odds and more about defying bedtime. You wake up in a tangle of sheets, shuffling off to brush your teeth, not because you're demonstrating resilience, but because mom will give you that look if you don't. You hunt for matching socks, argue with your sibling about who gets the last toaster waffle, and generally act like every other kid on your block, equal parts chaos and charm. School days are long and loud. Your biggest academic obstacle is Mrs. Schmidt's times tables, not some invisible neurological curse. You daydream about the playground, the ice cream truck, and the possibility of rain cancelling PE. If anyone's expecting you to spontaneously combust in science class, you disappoint them by doodling aliens in the margins of your worksheet instead. Your teacher sometimes forgets your background, at least until you ace a spelling test or accidentally launch your juice box across the room. Afternoons are spent outside, where the only diagnosis anyone's making is whether you can catch a pop fly or who can jump the farthest from the swing set. The other kids aren't waiting for a disaster. They're too busy arguing about who gets to be Mario and who's stuck being Luigi. You might get teased for something, your haircut, your shoes, your unfortunate run-in with cafeteria pizza, but nobody cares about the year you were born or the headlines that followed. At home, your family is still figuring it out. But now the stakes feel smaller. Your parents are no longer waiting for you to fulfill some tragic prophecy. Instead, they're waiting for you to remember to take out the trash. Dinner is more about who's setting the table, and less about which expert is calling tonight. Sure, there are moments when old worries bubble up, a sideways glance when you get too quiet, a nervous check-in when you struggle with a new task. But most of the time, your biggest family drama is who finished the milk and put the empty carton back in the fridge. You learn, with a little relief and a lot of humor, that normal isn't a diagnosis, it's a moving target. You mess up sometimes. You get bored, frustrated, goofy, loud. Sometimes you eat 3 bowls of cereal just because you can. Your failures aren't newsworthy, your victories aren't miracles. They're just the up and down rhythm of growing up. Your life is punctuated not by symptoms but by Saturday morning cartoons, scraped knees, and the constant search for snacks. The only thing that makes you different, most days, is the bizarre fact that you're not nearly as interesting as people once thought you'd be. And honestly, that's the dream. By now, most of the grown-ups who once fretted over you have moved on to new worries. The world's headlines are chasing the next big panic. You're left with your bike, your favorite shows, and a surprising sense of relief that you never had to live up or down to all the hype. It's a quiet rebellion, this business of being ordinary. You're not here to be a tragedy or a triumph. You're here to laugh, learn, mess up, and keep going, just like everyone else. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is just be a kid, living, laughing, and growing up, while the world learns, slowly, very slowly, to relax. Time passes, music gets grungier, and you get taller. The label doesn't magically disappear, but it starts to fade, just a little. Now, people panic about something new, and you get to be yesterday's news. You blink, and suddenly it's the era of flannel shirts, beanie babies, and a never-ending rotation of boy bands. Somewhere along the way, the headlines move on. The country is obsessed with Y2K, the Macarena, and whether or not Ross and Rachel are actually on a break. The nation's top health concern is now mad cow disease, not crack babies. In a way, you're relieved. It's nice not to be the main character in America's long-running public health melodrama, but the label never quite leaves. It's there in the subtext. Your school file is lighter, but there's still that page tucked in the back, history of prenatal exposure, scrawled in faded ink. Your pediatrician still squints at you during checkups, as if half expecting you to grow a third arm. Teachers start the year by promising a fresh start, then double-check your test scores when you don't finish your reading log. The world has a short attention span, but you notice the little things. A neighbor at a barbecue mentions your difficult start in life, just loudly enough for the potato salad to wilt. Someone's mum corners your mum at the grocery store, offering well-meaning but wildly unhelpful advice about vitamins, diet, or, this year's favorite, meditation tapes. It's progress, technically, but the vibe is still there. Meanwhile, the new wave of experts are rewriting the playbook. Articles start to appear in news magazines. Early panic overstated. Crack baby myths debunked. If you're lucky, your parents clip out the best ones and stick them to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a smiley face. But not everyone reads the updates. Some folks are loyal to the original story, like old fans refusing to accept that their favorite TV character was ever written off. At school, things are changing too. Your new teacher is more concerned about your handwriting than your medical history. The nurse has moved on to policing fruit roll-ups and head lice. There's still the occasional sideways look, but most of the time, you're just another kid complaining about homework and trying to hide your Tamagotchi in your backpack. Social life has its own flavor now. You trade pogs, play Mortal Kombat, and talk about the Spice Girls or who can run the fastest mile. Some friends know about your label, some don't, and by now you've mastered the art of shrugging off awkward questions. If someone asks, you answer with the breezy confidence of someone who's lived through 100 adult interventions and survived. You're officially too busy for a crisis. You have to figure out your math homework before dinner. At home, the subject almost never comes up anymore. Your parents breathe a little easier. Family gatherings are about who brought the best dessert, not who read the most alarming magazine article. The old whispers are replaced with regular teenage drama. Bad haircuts, late nights, and the ongoing saga of the missing TV remote. But every once in a while, the label resurfaces, like a song stuck in your head from a radio station you don't even listen to anymore. A form asks about developmental history. A doctor asks about risk factors. You sigh, answer, and move on. Because now, finally, you get to decide what part of your past matters most. And here's the best part. By the end of the decade, you realize that the world's panic was just a blip, a noisy background track to a much longer, richer story, your own. The teen years arrive with their own fresh hell. Mood swings, pimples, and the lingering suspicion from adults who saw one too many TV specials. But honestly, who isn't a disaster at 14? If childhood was a minefield, adolescence is the talent show where everyone's convinced you're about to set something on fire by accident or design. Your old label gets a new coat of paint, this time with an extra helping of hormones and self-consciousness. The whispers from the grown-ups get more sophisticated. Now they use words like adolescent risk factors, peer group influence, and transition planning. You just call it surviving Monday. High school is a petri dish of stereotypes, and you're at the top of everyone's interesting case study list. There's a new round of specialists, guidance counselors, career advisors, and that one school psychologist who keeps offering to talk whenever you need. You don't, but you go anyway because it gets you out of gym. Every grown-up who remembers the panic from your early years is now watching for signs. Are you moody? Congratulations. It's potential emotional dysregulation. Are you too quiet? Possible social withdrawal. Too loud? Seeking attention. Your adolescent angst isn't just normal, according to the experts. It's a medical mystery wrapped in a pizza pocket. But here's the twist. Everyone your age is a mess. It's the 1990s. No one's got it together. One kid is convinced his Tamagotchi is alive. Another is determined to win student council by handing out warheads in the hallway. Someone's growing a goatee for no reason, and half your classmates claim they're going to start a garage band. In this chaotic ecosystem, your differences start to blend right in. Nobody notices if your backpack is organized. They're too busy worrying about what song will play at the next school dance. You try on new personalities the way your older sibling tries on thrift store jeans. Awkwardly, and always with a sense of regret. One week, you're wearing flannel, trying to look deep and mysterious. The next, you're obsessed with skateboarding, despite the fact you can't balance on a moving sidewalk. You're supposed to be a statistic, but all you want is to figure out if you can survive biology class without falling asleep. The teachers still check your progress. There are meetings about transitioning to adulthood, which is hilarious because nobody in the building seems remotely adult. Your parents worry about peer influence, but mostly you just want to hang out at the mall and figure out if you're more of a Leonardo or a Michelangelo. There are still the awkward moments. A doctor's appointment that's more quiz show than checkup. A classmate's parent who whispers, "You know, you've done really well, all things considered." Some kids avoid you, convinced you have some secret ninja backstory. Others are drawn to your sarcasm and your skill at finding the best vending machine snacks. You're more defined by your playlist than your pediatric file. The best part? The world is finally distracted. Everyone's panicking about something else. The internet, violent video games, Y2K, whatever. You get to slide under the radar, occasionally reminding people you're still here by acing a test, joining a club, or just showing up, moody, pimply, and, on some days, miraculously average. Adolescence is a mess for everyone, but if you can make it through the rumors, the stereotypes, and the gym class square dance, You come out the other side with a skill set nobody taught you in health class. Resilience, humor, and the uncanny ability to laugh at the madness while making it through. One cringe-filled day at a time. Turns out, you're not alone. Support groups, new friends, and the occasional therapist who actually gets it. You start to realize that crack baby is just a label, not your destiny. Somewhere between middle school and your first awkward school dance, you discover that the world isn't made up entirely of skeptics, experts, and that one nosy neighbor who's always peering through the blinds. There are people, real, live, ordinary people, who understand. They don't see you as a walking warning label or the subject of a public health after-school special. They see you, laugh with you, roll their eyes at the same cafeteria food, and, most importantly, know how to mind their own business. Your first taste of real solidarity might come from a support group. Maybe your parents drag you to a room with bad lighting, a musty carpet, and a spread of store-brand cookies. It's filled with other kids and families, all brought together by some version of the same story. There's a moment of panic. Are you about to become the poster child for group therapy? But then someone cracks a joke about how boring the pamphlets are, and everyone laughs, loud, real, and completely unashamed. For once, nobody's taking notes or asking probing questions about your developmental trajectory. Instead, you share stories, trade jokes, and realize that nobody here is buying the myth of the doomed generation. Even at school, things shift. You meet friends who don't care about your history, only about your taste in music, your jump shot, or your ability to do the best impression of the principal's nasal voice. Maybe there's the kid who always has extra gum, or the one who's even weirder than you. With them, you don't have to perform. You can just exist, free from the obligation to inspire or concern anyone. You join a club, a sports team, a theater troupe, or just hang out behind the gym with other misfits. It's a reminder that, for every rumor, there's an inside joke waiting to be made. Occasionally you find adults who get it. The therapist who listens, actually listens, without flipping through a checklist. The teacher who asks about your weekend, not your progress. The coach who pushes you to run faster, not because you're overcoming adversity, but because you're slacking off like everyone else. These people don't see you as a project. They see you as someone growing up, learning, messing up, and getting back up again. There's comfort in realizing you don't have to go through it all alone. When the labels start to itch, you talk to someone who knows how that feels. When a new rumor pops up, your group laughs it off together. And when you start to doubt yourself, because who doesn't, there's always someone around who remembers to bring snacks. The world outside may still clutch its headlines, but inside your circle, you write your own story. You find strength in numbers, in laughter, in the shared experience of just surviving. Some of your greatest allies are people who, in another life, might have been written off for their own reasons. The anxious, the awkward, the overlooked, but together, you turn vulnerability into resilience. Slowly, the label loses its power. It becomes an old story, one that's funny in hindsight and barely relevant to who you're becoming. You stop explaining, stop apologizing, stop performing for anyone who isn't cheering you on. You find out the truth that nobody warned you about. There's nothing more normal than being a little different, and nothing more healing than finding your people, support, solidarity, survival. These are the real milestones. And as you move forward, you realize you never needed to be the exception to someone else's rule. You just needed to belong, exactly as you are. By adulthood, you're more than a panic headline. Jobs, relationships, disappointments, welcome to normal life. If anything, you've earned a PhD in surviving other people's expectations. It's a strange thing, stepping out of the rumor mill and into real adulthood. One day you're filling out a college application or nervously tying a necktie for your first interview, And suddenly you realize nobody cares about the label anymore. They care if you show up on time. They care if you can make small talk at the coffee machine. They care, mostly, about whether you've ever used the office microwave for fish. Those old crack baby headlines are relics now, yellowed, crumpled, and buried under more pressing concerns like credit scores, dental appointments, and which streaming service has your favorite show. The world has moved on to new panics. Reality TV, gluten, TikTok. Your childhood, once considered national news, is now just an anecdote you use at parties if someone brags a little too much about their adversity. Adulthood brings its own education. You discover that most people are walking around with invisible labels, their own myths, and plenty of awkward backstories. Suddenly, your old reputation as the high-risk kid is a little badge of honor, proof that you can roll with life's punches. You've built an internal toolkit for navigating awkward situations, a sharp sense of humor, an eye for nonsense, and a radar for people who treat labels as reality. Jobs come and go. You learn to smile through the tell me about yourself part of interviews. Careful to keep it light. No need to give HR a heart attack. Some workplaces are supportive, some less so. But you develop the universal adult superpower, nodding politely and ignoring the subtext. When your boss tells you to take initiative, you resist the urge to explain how you've been taking initiative since preschool. Mainly in the art of dodging assumptions. Relationships get interesting. There are partners who want the deep backstory, and others who just want to know your favorite pizza topping. You notice who listens, who jokes, and who tenses up when you mention the words panic, headline, or epidemic. You gravitate to those who laugh with you, not at you, and slowly your tribe gets stronger, weirder, more loyal. The myth becomes a shared inside joke, not a dividing line. You make mistakes, sometimes big, sometimes beautifully average. You forget birthdays, lose your keys, burn dinner, botch a deadline, break a heart, get your own heart broken. Not because you're a cautionary tale, but because you're an actual adult, improvising like everyone else. Your failures are gloriously ordinary. Your success is satisfying in the smallest, most mundane ways. As the years roll by, your childhood label fades. Old teachers retire, social workers get new cases. And even your parents let go, finally seeing you not as a case study, but as the sum of your own choices, good, bad, and ridiculous. Every now and then, the past pops up. An old acquaintance, a doctor's form, a random flashback triggered by a song on the radio. But now, you have the tools to laugh at it, process it, and put it back where it belongs. One part of a much larger, much stranger, and ultimately, much more interesting story. Because the truth is, you never needed to escape the myth. You just needed to outgrow it. And you did. One ordinary, extraordinary day at a time. As you look back, the hysteria of the 1980s seems almost funny if it weren't so real. The real story isn't about the panic, or the predictions, or even the label. It's about making it through, laughing at the madness, and proving everyone spectacularly, gloriously wrong. When you rewind the tape, the images flicker in high contrast. Anxious doctors, frowning journalists, and that ever-present doomsday ticker tape of predictions. The 1980s weren't subtle. People panicked in parachute pants, their concern amplified by every neon headline and news anchor with gravity-defying hair. Your first steps were watched like an Olympic event. Each cough was a headline. Every smile, a miracle recovery. According to the experts, you should have spontaneously combusted, gotten lost on the way to kindergarten, or, at the very least, become the subject of a sad song in a Lifetime movie. But life, as always, had other plans. The future didn't care about the script written for you by frantic policymakers and talk show hosts. It turns out, most of the time, The only thing truly cracked was the logic in those headlines. The world moved on to fresh disasters. Killer bees, acid rain, the great Beanie Baby collapse. Your old story faded into background noise, a footnote in the rolling news crawl of American anxiety. You realize now that your biggest rebellion wasn't in defying gravity or confounding scientists, but in growing up with a sense of humor. Every medical prediction you failed to fulfill became a punchline. "How's your attention span?" people used to ask. "Sorry, I wasn't listening," you'd reply, and both of you would laugh, because the truth had become lighter than the myth. What those experts didn't understand is that people are infinitely weirder and more stubborn than any study could measure. You made friends who didn't care about your backstory, only your favorite X-Men character. You learned to spot the difference between genuine concern and the sort of interest that just wants a headline. You discovered that, in the end, nobody knows what anyone else is really up against, and that's what makes everyone so quietly heroic. And the hope? It crept in quietly, disguised as ordinary days. It was in the way your family kept showing up, awkward Thanksgivings and all. In every teacher who rooted for you, every friend who chose you for kickball, every time you surprised yourself by simply carrying on. The hope was never about becoming a miracle, it was about becoming yourself. Now, when you meet someone still convinced by the old stories, you offer them a gentle smile and a better one, because the label never defined you. It only taught you how to resist being boxed in, how to find allies, and how to keep your own story alive. You outlived the hysteria. You became living proof that panic is loud, but persistence is quiet and infinitely more powerful. So you look back, not with bitterness, but with a wry sense of accomplishment. You survived the era of moral panics, junk science, and sensational specials. You made it through beeping monitors, extra appointments, sideways glances, and every concerned citizen with a subscription to Newsweek. And you keep going. Not because you have something to prove, but because that's what people do. In the end, your story is one of resilience, humor, and the quiet courage of getting up every day, ready for whatever madness comes next. Tonight, you can laugh at the panic and marvel at your own persistence. Because the best part about looking back is realizing just how far you've come, and how, against all odds, you became gloriously, stubbornly, brilliantly yourself. Even if you're just trying to master hopscotch, the rumors about you travel faster than a note passed in math class. One kid swears crack babies glow in the dark. Another insists you can't eat Pop Rocks or you'll explode. By lunchtime, you're practically a superhero or a supervillain, depending on who you ask. And somehow, it's always a friend's cousin's neighbor who knows for sure. Childhood is a petri dish for rumors. But if you've got a medical file with more red ink than a failed spelling test, you become the epicenter of a brand new mythology. The playground becomes a stage, and your ordinary life turns into the wildest choose-your-own-adventure story ever circulated over juice boxes. You sneeze during silent reading? The legend grows. Did you know if they sneeze 3 times, it means there's a tornado coming? You trip during tag. It's because crack babies can't turn left. By 3rd grade, your reputation has eclipsed actual celebrities. You're the Loch Ness monster of the elementary school set, half mystery, half cautionary tale. If you bring a weird lunch, it's definitely because you're on a special diet. If you ace a quiz, you must have super brain powers. If you're caught daydreaming, someone claims it's because your mind can see radio waves. Congratulations. You've become living, breathing folklore. It's hard not to laugh sometimes. The rumors are just absurd enough to be funny, until you realize that, somewhere along the line, the stories start sticking. A new kid joins your class, and by the second recess, they've been briefed on your mythical powers. Is it true you can't eat candy? They whisper. eyeing your fruit snacks like they're radioactive. You sigh and trade snacks anyway, knowing it's easier to let the myth do the talking than explain, again, that you're just a regular kid who sometimes forgets to wash behind your ears. Of course, it's not all bad. Some of the rumors work in your favor. The bullies hesitate, convinced you have a sixth sense for tattling. When it's time to pick teams, someone always wants you for dodgeball, just in case you can throw like the Hulk. You become a master at feeding the legend, maybe just a little, especially if it means getting the best spot on the swings or the first slice of birthday cake. Parents and teachers try to put out the fires, armed with earnest speeches about respect and facts. The school nurse gives a special presentation on how pop rocks are, in fact, safe for everyone, no matter their medical background. The librarian organizes an assembly about famous people who overcame obstacles. And you are definitely not thrilled to be called on stage as the local example. But the truth is, grown-up logic is no match for the playground rumor mill. If anything, every adult denial just adds a new layer to the legend. That's what they want you to think. Sometimes, you wish you could just blend in, become invisible for a day, or at least become less interesting than the kid who can burp the alphabet. But the stories have a momentum all their own, rolling from grade to grade, passed along with a wink and a nudge. You learn to shrug it off, roll your eyes, and sometimes embrace your role as the school's resident urban legend, because beneath all the wild tales and cafeteria whispers, the reality is still there. You're surviving, growing, and, much to everyone's disappointment, not glowing in the dark. And as the years go by, you start to see the rumors for what they are. A weird, funny, occasionally useful shield against the world's judgment. They're proof that childhood, no matter how strange, is always a little bit magical, especially when you get to be the myth everyone else is still trying to figure out. Nothing says special like having a local politician stop by the neonatal unit for a photo op. You're 3 days old, but someone wants you to be the face of the war on drugs. Flashbulbs pop, hands get shaken, and somewhere out there, your bassinet just became a bullet point in a campaign speech. It's not every day you become a prop for democracy in action, but here you are, all 5 pounds of you, swaddled for the press. The hospital floor smells of hand sanitizer, cafeteria coffee, and a faint whiff of aftershave as the visiting delegation enters in a whirlwind of suits, campaign buttons, and nervous staffers. Someone brings a big camera, someone else brings balloons. The local news anchor arrives, hair perfectly helmeted, and starts working the room for quotes. The politician himself is a vision of mid-80s optimism, thick glasses, a tie with a flag motif, and the unmistakable air of someone who has never changed a diaper. He pauses at your crib with a grave expression, practiced, not felt. Cameras flash. "This is what's at stake," he intones, looking like he might adopt you right on the spot, or at least fundraise off your tiny knitted hat. His entourage huddles behind him, all nodding gravely as he proclaims that every child deserves a healthy, drug-free start in life. The speech is equal parts moral outrage and recycled sound bites. There's a passing mention of community resources and the children of our future, and, of course, the obligatory tough on crime flourish. You, meanwhile, are mostly concerned with the wet sensation in your diaper and wondering if anyone is actually going to feed you on time. The hospital staff are caught somewhere between pride and panic. They gently jostle your bassinet for better lighting and murmur reminders to look alert to your sleeping form. Nurses check their hair, doctors stand awkwardly by the window, and the PR director hovers, ready to whisk away any baby who starts screaming mid-speech. There's nothing like using newborns to sell a message of hope and fear all at once. You are, for a brief, shining moment, the most famous person in the room, at least until someone mentions the mayor's attendance, and all cameras swivel for a handshake. Flashbulbs pop, microphones are thrust over your head, and your mother, bleary, rumpled, fiercely protective, gets a pat on the hand from a stranger who assures her that help is on the way. There's applause, followed by a lot of awkward clapping from people who aren't sure why they're clapping. As quickly as they arrive, the politicians sweep out, leaving a wake of balloons, brochures, and the faint scent of promises. The reporters chase after them, hunting for one last soundbite, and the nursery quiets again. Your bassinet, previously a campaign prop, is just a plastic crib once more, a place to nap and wait for the next round of tests. Later that evening, the local news will run a segment about the fight for our children's future. You'll star as the silent symbol of hope, vulnerability, and policy reform, all while making your best cranky face at the camera. Somewhere, your photo will end up in a press kit or on a flyer that never gets recycled. But the truth is, the campaign stops, the promises fade, and real life creeps quietly back in. No politician tucks you in that night. No press release changes your diaper. Your parents, left behind with armfuls of well-meaning pamphlets, just want some sleep. And maybe, if they're lucky, a hospital meal that doesn't taste like cardboard. In the end, your brief flirtation with political fame is just another surreal chapter in the story of growing up under the public eye. The headlines move on, the balloons deflate, but you keep going, tiny, determined, and blissfully unaware that you've already been used to sell 3 new laws and a set of commemorative pins. Because you're officially part of a national crisis, everyone with a clipboard wants a piece of you. Doctors, grad students, and scientists with questionable haircuts want to measure your head, track your reflexes, and write reports with alarming titles. Welcome to the glamorous world of unpaid medical celebrity. It starts early, long before you know the difference between a pediatrician and a protractor. One day, your parents are told about a wonderful opportunity to participate in a research study. The pamphlet is glossy, the promises are vague, and the list of potential outcomes includes everything but free cookies. The price of fame? Endless appointments in stuffy exam rooms that smell like latex gloves and nervous optimism. At first, you don't realize you're special. Maybe you just think every kid gets their height measured with 3 different rulers, or is asked to walk in a straight line while a stranger times them with a stopwatch. You sit through tests where you stack blocks, draw spirals, or stare at lights blinking on and off like a budget disco. Someone always says, "Fascinating," and scribbles furiously. Then there are the grad students. Eager, awkward, fueled by coffee and the desperate hope of finishing a thesis before the millennium ends. They're always explaining the importance of the work, as if you might wander off and spill the secrets of the study to the rival research team in room 102. They wear sneakers with lab coats and ask your parents to sign forms that use words like longitudinal outcomes, control group, and possible reimbursement, not guaranteed. Sometimes the studies get creative. You're shown ink blots and asked what you see. You're given memory games, tongue twisters, and, for reasons that remain unclear, sometimes forced to watch VHS tapes of people acting out very obvious emotions. Now, how does that make you feel? They ask, and you stare blankly, thinking mostly about snack time. Your parents do their best to keep up. They carry folders of consent forms, logbooks, and appointment reminders. They try to sound grateful for all the support and resources, but mostly they want to know if you'll ever get a break from being observed, tested, and evaluated. It's a never-ending parade of parking validation, waiting room toys missing half their pieces, and polite laughter at jokes made by someone who hasn't slept since the Carter administration. Each new report comes with a title more dramatic than the last. Early neurobehavioral outcomes in children exposed to urban stressors is a favorite, so is developmental markers in the post-crisis generation. You are, for all intents and purposes, the most well-documented ordinary child in the county, if not the state. Somewhere, your reflexes are being presented on a conference poster between a study about squirrel migration and one on the dangers of bubble gum. not that you get any say in it. The world of research is a one-way mirror. You're the subject, the data point, the anonymous child in the graph's red bar. Your compensation? The occasional sticker, a generic lollipop, and the lifelong right to say you helped advance science, whatever that means. If you're lucky, you get to miss a little school. Score! But you'll pay it back in hours spent drawing circles or stacking blocks while adults whisper about deviation from the norm. And when it's all over, you return to regular life. School, home, friends who have no idea how famous your neurons are in academic circles. You learn to laugh at the absurdity, the parade of professionals, the mountain of forms, and the world's relentless search for something wrong. The real secret? You're fine. Maybe even a little extraordinary, not because of the studies, but because you survived them. And in the glamorous world of unpaid medical celebrity, that's as good as it gets. Nutrition in the 80s is already an adventure, but when you're born under the crack baby label, it gets more interesting. Some days it's processed cheese in a box, so orange it's probably visible from space. Other days it's hospital apple juice in tiny cups, served with a warning and a pamphlet. Either way, you're not exactly feasting like a Rockefeller. From the very beginning, snack time is a lesson in expectations, namely, lowering them. Your earliest meals are rationed out by a series of professionals who treat every ounce of formula like a science experiment. Is it too much? Too little? Could the temperature of the bottle affect your long-term neurodevelopmental outcomes? There are more questions about your diet than about the country's foreign policy. Your first taste of apple juice is poured into a miniature plastic cup with all the ceremony of a wine tasting, and your mother is handed a pamphlet about watching for reactions. If you burp, it's a clinical observation. If you spit up, it's a minor incident. Outside the hospital, the world of snacks is a weird, wonderful, and deeply confusing place. If you end up in foster care, your pantry options are a grab bag lottery. Sometimes you score a host parent who believes in whole grains and carrot sticks. Other times, it's a steady diet of government cheese and off-brand peanut butter. Either way, snack time is less about flavor and more about survival. You learn that cheese should not, technically, be shiny. You wonder if apple juice is supposed to taste like sadness and antiseptic. At school, the lunch lady piles your tray high with foods in every color except natural, while teachers hover to make sure you eat enough to keep up your strength. The experts have a lot to say about what you eat. Social workers hand your parents thick packets about optimal nutrition for at-risk youth, with helpful tips like avoid excessive sugar and choose fresh fruit. This advice is, of course, wildly optimistic for families who shop on a shoestring budget and have to choose between apples and, well, keeping the lights on. Your mum tries to follow the rules, but it's hard when the local food pantry's main offering is yet another block of cheese that could double as a traffic cone. Your friends at school bring lunches that are equally questionable. Thermoses of mystery soup, bologna sandwiches, and the occasional banana that has definitely seen better days. The snack trade becomes an underground economy. You can swap a pudding cup for 3 packs of saltines, or leverage your coveted chocolate milk for an entire bag of chips. There are rumors of a kid in 3rd grade who once brought Lunchables. He's still spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. Through it all, you develop a palate for the absurd. You learn that powdered milk is not, in fact, anything like real milk. That Jell-O is technically a food group, and that fruit punch flavor means red. You become suspicious of anything labeled nutritious by adults, and you learn to eat quickly before someone decides you're not thriving and whisks your snack away for analysis. Sometimes, nutritionists visit the school to talk about healthy choices. They gesture to posters of apples and broccoli while you quietly count the number of colors in your own lunch and wonder what category orange cheese substance falls under. If you ask questions, you're handed more pamphlets. If you don't eat your lunch, there's another meeting. But somehow, you grow. You develop tastes, favorites, weird snack rituals that become comfort in a world obsessed with your well-being. No, you're not dining like a Rockefeller, but you are surviving, thriving, and, every now and then, scoring the good apple juice without a pamphlet in sight. And that, in a world of government cheese and hospital snacks, is its own tiny, triumphant victory. Here's the plot twist. You make it. The headlines move on. The experts find a new crisis. One day, you realize that, somehow, despite the odds, you're still here. And the only thing truly cracked was the hysteria, not you. So you laugh, keep going, and occasionally remind people that surviving the 80s was an extreme sport no matter how you started. It's almost cinematic, the way the world pivots away. Yesterday, you were the poster child for impending doom. Today, you're background noise in a story about some new threat. Mad cow disease, Y2K. The alarming rise in Beanie Baby counterfeits. Even the social workers and specialists who once haunted your calendar start fading into memory. Where you were once the subject of case studies and urgent parent-teacher meetings, now you're just another person standing in line for movie tickets, trying to remember if you fed the cat. You notice the change gradually. No more hush-hush meetings about your developmental milestones. No more earnest lectures from experts who pronounce your fate with all the subtlety of a fire alarm. Instead, you're left with the usual business of growing up, awkward haircuts, bad cafeteria food, and the eternal struggle of surviving group projects with Chad, who never does his part. Sometimes you find yourself reflecting on the journey with a kind of baffled amusement. All the dire warnings, the pitying glances, the mountains of paperwork, it's hard to believe anyone thought it would end any differently. You start to suspect that childhood is less about predictions and more about improvisation. You muddle through. You mess up. You keep going. There's a comfort in realizing the real disaster was the adult's panic, not your potential. Friends, family, even the occasional nosy neighbor start noticing too. "You're doing so well," they exclaim, as if surprised you haven't spontaneously combusted. You smile and nod, tucking the compliment away for later, along with the memory of every time you were counted out before you'd even started. You might even develop a fondness for irony. After all, nothing makes you feel more invincible than outlasting a national panic. As you get older, you hear new rumors about other crises. It's always something. New drugs, new dangers, new lost generations. And every time you hear those words, you remember your own story, a little bit wilder, a little bit funnier, a lot less dramatic than anyone ever expected. You tell new friends, "I survived the crack baby hysteria of the 80s," and watch as their eyes widen, waiting for a punchline that, honestly, is just your ordinary stubborn survival. The best part? You get to write your own epilogue. You grow up, get a job, pay taxes, reluctantly, and forget to return library books. You struggle with things everyone struggles with: heartbreak, laundry, figuring out what deductible actually means. None of it is because of your history. All of it is because you're human, flawed, funny, and unreasonably resilient. The world never quite admits it was wrong, but you don't need the apology. The victory is quiet, steady, and deeply satisfying. Every ordinary day is a gentle rebellion against the script you were handed. You're living proof that life doesn't follow headlines. It follows its own weird, wonderful path. And so you laugh. You keep going. You tell your story when you want, not when you're asked. And every so often you remind the world that surviving the 80s, labels, panic and all, wasn't just about making it out alive. It was about outliving the myth and living well, one absurd, unpredictable, and beautifully ordinary day at a time. And that's our journey, drifting through the neon-lit haze and chaos of 1980s America, seeing the world through the eyes of the so-called crack baby, which, let's be honest, was more a media invention than a medical destiny. You survived hospital hysteria, headline panic, bureaucratic paperwork, awkward childhoods, overzealous experts, snack food that was both a mystery and a dare, and enough labels to fill a filing cabinet at the CDC. You were handed a story before you could talk, judged by strangers who thought they knew your fate, and yet, somehow, you just kept going. There were moments when it felt like you'd been cast as the villain in a TV after-school special, or the before photo in a Reagan-era public health campaign. But every day, you grew a little, laughed a lot, and occasionally gave side-eye to anyone who thought they could predict your life by reading a Newsweek cover. If there's a lesson here, it's that people are stubborn, weird, and impossible to summarize, especially when they're born into chaos. The real horror wasn't you. It was the panic, the myths, and the all-too-human urge to make sense of what we fear by slapping a dramatic label on it and running a 6-part miniseries. So tonight, as you lie back in your clean bed, surrounded by comforts the 80s could only dream of, streaming TV, decent snacks, Google, and maybe even a little peace, take a slow breath. Whisper a quiet thanks to every survivor of every overblown news cycle, to every kid who was underestimated, and to yourself for weathering your own storms. History may be ridiculous and sometimes horrifying, but people are resilient, hopeful, and a little bit absurd. And in the end, that's what keeps us going. One headline, one laugh, one perfectly ordinary day at a time. Rest easy. You made it through the 80s. You'll handle tomorrow just fine. Good night.